The cognitive diversity of a team or an individual is the summation of your lived experience plus how your brain works, just your brain chemistry. Are you spatially intelligent or are you musically intelligent? And it's how you kind of connect those things and bridge those things and enable new things to emerge out of bringing these previously siloed things together. That's the simplest way for me to describe my world model around innovation, creativity, and how you have impact and differentiation in the world.
From aeronautical engineering to trailblazing the intersection of art and technology, meet Domhnaill Hernon. Domhnaill is an award-winning technology and innovation executive. He received an undergrad in aeronautical engineering and a PhD in aerodynamics from the University of Limerick and an executive MBA from Dublin City University, Ireland. He currently holds 2 positions as global lead of the EY Metaverse Lab and the Cognitive Human Enterprise. These are pioneering new approaches placing humans at center between business, technology, and society. Prior to that, he held several senior leadership positions across R&D, innovation, and creativity while at Nokia Bell Labs. Domhnaill's work has been featured in Wired Magazine, Forbes, Times Square, South by Southwest, Nasdaq, Mobile World Congress, Ars Electronica, and TEDx, and he advises innovation and cultural programs globally. Domhnaill and I met back in 2017 in New York City, and I've always been impressed with his understanding of the crucial role artists play in driving innovation. I know I've learned a lot from knowing him over the years and excited to share our conversation with you today. You're in for a treat as he shares his unique perspective on the evolution of the internet from 2D to 3D, the current state of the metaverse, and the imperative for businesses to invest in it, especially with Gen Z's adoption of it. He runs an Artist in Residence program at EY to deeply infuse artist perspectives and challenge technologists to think beyond technology-only solutions. He also shares the power of collaborating with artists to challenge our assumptions and have our digital worlds reflect the full spectrum of lived human experiences. In this episode, you'll hear Domhnaill's journey from his early days as an aeronautical engineer to becoming a thought leader of the metaverse. He shares his aha moment when an intellectual anvil hit him on his head and changed the trajectory of his thinking on how innovation should be approached. He also discusses EY's exploration of identity and inclusivity in the metaverse and how technology can unintentionally homogenize rather than allow for authentic individual expression. He urges listeners to value different perspectives, experiences, and types of intelligence beyond their own, as that is where the biggest value is created. Join the conversation as Domhnaill shares why the metaverse isn't dead despite headlines and his passion for pushing the boundaries of what's possible at the intersection of art, technology, and business. Enjoy.
But have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Domhnaill, welcome to Creativity Squared.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to have you on the show. Domhnaill and I met back in 2017 when we were both living in the New York City area. And I must say, I'm always jealous. Domhnaill has like the most fun job of merging tech and art together. Since we met, we've been colleagues. We've done panels together. We've seen each other speak at different conferences and events. So it's really great to have you on the show. So welcome again.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know how many people say to me that they think I have the best job in the world, and it's true, but we might get into it through our conversation, is that it's hard work, right? Bringing these worlds of art and creativity and tech together really takes a lot of effort. So happy to dive a bit deeper with you on that as well.
We're definitely going to dive deep into that. But first, for people who are meeting you for the first time, can you introduce yourself and give us a bit of your origin story?
Origin story, yeah. So Domhnaill Hernon, a kind of a very difficult Irish name, phonetically impossible. I'm living in the US the last 8 years, mainly in the New York area. I did Aeronautical Engineering in my undergraduate degree. I did some further studies at university working on aerodynamics and fluid dynamics, and ended up spending a lot of my professional career in an organization called Bell Labs. Bell Labs is the research and innovation arm of Nokia, and have been with Ernst & Young, or EY as we call it nowadays, for the last couple of years, and really working on deep technology, technology development, technology research, technology integration, and then in the last several years spending a lot of time thinking about humans at the center of technology and business. And that's what brought me to working with artists and creatives as well.
And your title at EY is head of the Metaverse Labs. So can you tell us specifically what the labs does in general, and then also maybe even taking a step back of how you define the metaverse? Because I feel like it might be amorphous in some people's minds. So since this is the world that you live in so much, let's dive into all things metaverse.
So maybe we'll start with how we define it. And at its simplest form, we talk about the evolution of the internet. And if you think about the internet today, when you go on a web page, it's largely text-based. It's 2D and flat, and any images or videos you have are 2D images and videos. And that's the web of today. And it works really well. It's a very good way to get knowledge out there and do all the cool things that the internet does. So that's how you experience the internet: 2D, flat, largely text-based. And then think about how you interact with it. You have a mouse, you have a keyboard, and you click on things, and it's fine. It's a good interface. It's an okay experience, but it's really not like how we as humans interact with any other part of the world. Okay, so that's the internet of today, and it's fine. We think about the evolution of the internet and how it might become more 3D, more spatial, and more immersive, and more collaborative. And that basically is what the metaverse is. Now, what we mean by that is, in other words, you could say maybe the internet evolves to be more like how we as humans interact with each other in the physical world. No, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Now, when you mentioned it's amorphous, and I agree, which can be a good or a bad thing at times, the reason it gets a little bit difficult for people to understand is because a lot of the hype that you read, or a lot of the articles you read on Google or in the media, are largely about virtual reality. Okay, so virtual reality, for anyone that might not know, is you put on these quite big goggles, and in your view, your eyes only see an entirely digital, entirely virtual reality in front of you. You're kind of disconnected from the physical world. You're disconnected from your normal physical reality. That's virtual reality, and that works really well in some instances, some examples. But you also can experience the metaverse in what's called augmented reality. So that's where you might have glasses. I'm wearing glasses at the moment for anyone that can't see this. And I'm very much tethered in the physical. I am my human self in this physical world, but I can have this digital overlay on my visual where maybe when I'm looking at you, it gives me a pop-up and says, Helen is the founder of this podcast and Helen's interests are these kind of things. And it can be so much more than that. So that's what augmented reality is. And a lot of people believe that's probably over time where you will use the metaverse the most, is because you're really connected as a human to the physical world, but you have this digital overlay that helps you be better at things, augments you in various ways. And then you have the other version of the metaverse, which is to use today's 2D web and today's devices of today, like laptops and tablets and phones, but you can go onto the internet and you have a 3D experience, like online games like Fortnite and Minecraft and Roblox. They are 3D worlds that are experienced on 2D devices. The great thing about that is you can use all of today's tech and build these metaverse experiences and tap into what I call the superpowers of the metaverse with today's tech, but then you also have the more slightly futuristic tech that is augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR. So It's nebulous because it's kind of all of those things. It connects the physical and it connects the digital. It talks about the evolution of the internet beyond what it is today. And there's so many different ways you can experience that. It does become a complicated topic, but all I would ask people to remember is the internet becomes more 3D. The internet becomes more like how we as humans interact with each other in the physical world. And that's, I think, the best way to start off your understanding of what the metaverse is.
I appreciate you saying that. I know I read the book Ready Player One, which I highly recommend. And I think most people in the VR space have read that book. And if you've seen the movie, but the book is better. It's a dystopian future where the planet, due to climate change, is uninhabitable. So everyone mostly plugs into one metaverse. I forget what it's called now. But one thing that you had shared with me ahead of us recording is that I love the comparison to the internet, that there's still going to be closed and open metaverses and whatnot too. And that gaming already is such a great entryway to think about it. I know you talk to executives all the time. And I guess I'll also admit that with the hype cycle of Facebook and the metaverse dying, I kind of wrote it off too. But it's come up in so many conversations on this podcast, to be honest. I'm like, okay, I shouldn't write off the metaverse at all. And that's one reason why I'm excited to talk to you. But I know you talk to executives all the time, getting them on board of like, this is the future. And what are some of the things that you explain to them where that light bulb comes off, where they really should be paying attention to what the metaverse is?
Yeah, so I get a lot of, and I understand this, but I get a lot of cynicism and a lot of, I meet a lot of folks in different industries, different sectors. I'm privileged to work all over the world, and I get to meet everyone. And a lot of folks that are in business kind of they're dismissive of it, and they're quite cynical, and that's fine. So we start off a conversation kind of typically trying to connect back to their daily lives. And I'll often ask them, I'll say, do you have any younger people in your family, any kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews or anything like that? And of course, most people will say, yeah, I do. And well, tell me what they do on a day-to-day basis. What are they spending a lot of their energy at? And inevitably, they will say, playing online video games. You're okay, yeah, so how much of their time? Hours and hours a day. And then you kind of go, well, tell me a little bit more about it. What are they doing in the games? What are they asking you for in the games? And they'll say, oh, yeah, they'll make a joke and roll their eyes and say, I'm giving them my credit card and they're spending a lot of money on in-game purchases, skins and products and all this kind of stuff, skins for their avatars. And you go, okay, interesting, yeah. And then I'll say, so, yeah, that's what's happening in your personal life. And then I'll connect it to the market and I'll say, so do you know that more than 80% of Gen Z are people born since 1996? Do you know that 80% or more of Gen Z play online games? And they'll be like, is it really that high? And I'll say, yeah, it is. And then I'll say, do you know that the gaming industry is many, many multiples bigger than movie industry and music industry combined? And then they'll go, no, you're lying, it's not. And I'll go, it is, and I can prove it because it's available information. And then you start seeing the cogs turn a bit, right? And you start seeing them becoming less cynical and a bit more serious about the future of their business and their employees and their customers. And then you start connecting that dots and you start saying, so if you understand, like Gen Z are people that were born in 1996, they're already coming into the workforce, they're already out working and they have spending power. So they're your future employees, they're your future leaders, they are your current employees, and they're your current and future consumers. Like, do you understand if they're spending all this time in these online gaming platforms and this is their spending power? And then I'll talk to them a little bit about some of the trends, like the social trends, how Gen Z, what they believe in, what they think about, what's very important to them. And it's very different to the previous generations. Like there's aspects of identity and representation and fluidity of a lot of different things that the older generations really struggle with. And I could go on, and I explain that to them. And then you kind of connect all the dots and you go, so you see, if you are not investing in the metaverse, you will not attract the best young talent. You will not retain your best young talent. You will not attract your brand loyalty from your new customers and consumers. You're going to lose out on all of these opportunities because you are not understanding them and you are not making investments to meet them where they are at. And where they are at is online more immersive, more engaging, more gamified type environment. So, and then I help them understand we're not talking about building a game. We don't want you, client A or EY, to invest in a game. What we're doing is we're taking the best elements that drive engagement and interactivity and collaboration and community building in the online games, and we're going to bring them into the enterprise setting, into the business setting, and we're going to make them enterprise worthy. We're going to make them fit for purpose for company needs, but we're going to tap into all of those aspects that drive that type of engagement with that community in the online games. And then when you connect those dots for them, make it very human, connected to their personal lived experience, all of a sudden then the light bulb goes off and they realize this is something they need to invest in because they connect it to their daily lives. Now, the odd thing that happens is, and I find this really fascinating, and I can't really explain why it happens other than people are very busy, and a lot of people disconnect their work lives from their personal lives. They almost split their brain in two, I find. And they often struggle to make that connection between what they experience on a day-to-day basis in their own lives or their family with what's going on at their business. And what I try to do is build those bridges in their mind to connect back to the personal lived experience, to the work, to make sure that they can see that the risk here is not in investing in the metaverse. The risk is in not investing in the metaverse, because this is such an obvious thing. And the way I describe it, almost no one has ever argued with me when I've described it in such a simple way. Everyone goes, well, when you describe it like that, that's just so obvious. Like, yeah, we have to invest. So it's kind of almost a no-brainer,
And on the, I guess, early adoption curve, I feel like Facebook really kicked off at least the VR space, and then the hype cycle came down. And now with the Apple Vision Pro, I could see that as another really exciting boost to the metaverse and the extended reality and metaverse. From the seat that you sit in, where do you feel that we're at on the early adoption, and your thoughts on Apple Vision Pro, or maybe even some of the other gaming elements where we're at, and on the business roadmaps? I would say probably invest now, but where is this tech going in the short term and long term, especially now with AI and Gen AI powering a bunch of new innovation as well?
Yeah, so the way, I spend a lot of time trying to understand the different sectors, the different industries, the different use cases, the different needs, what are the pain points in the different geographies or sectors, and then we do a lot of time spending mapping where the metaverse might add the most value. And when you look at that kind of holistically, or as holistically as you can, there's kind of three different types of metaverse that stand out. There's the social/consumer metaverse, which is really more like the online game platforms that we mentioned, Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. That's the social side. That's the consumer side. Now, brands do show up there. Like, our clients do have brand presence there in the online platform, and that's driven more from like a marketing campaign type of thing. That is very mature. So if you think of the hype cycle, that has come way out of the hype, that's come out of the trough of disillusionment, they're already hitting like plateau of productivity type. That's a gigantic industry, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Now, there's also the industrial metaverse, which is more like things like digital twins. And a digital twin, for anyone who doesn't know, is where you create a full 3D digital replica of maybe of a machine or a factory, or it could be of a business process. And you also often feed that real-time data through sensors, through what's called Internet of Things. And then you can take in that input, that historical data, and then you can run simulations on if then, like what happens in my facility if this happens with the data? How do I optimize? How do I drive productivity? Now, that's also way out of the trough of disillusionment. It's into the plateau of productivity. It's already a gigantic industry in its own way. And in the industry metaverse, there's a lot of, for many, many years prior to the metaverse terminology becoming very hyped up, there's a lot of use cases with proven and substantial return on investment on using virtual reality to enable prototyping in automotive or life sciences, and to do health and safety training in these types of environments where if you were to do thousands of hours of training in the physical facility, it would take so much time and it would cost so much downtime on the equipment that it would make the business a waste of time. So you can do all of that training in the virtual reality, and then when you come into the physical plant, you can apply that knowledge much more quickly, and it's just a far better solution. That's a proven out there for 10 plus years type technologies, digital twins, and training using VR. Now, where it gets confusing and where we talk about the hype is that, a company name that you mentioned that brought the metaverse terminology to the fore a couple of years ago.
That's the company that we're not naming again.
They're looking at kind of trying to bring it into the enterprise setting a little bit more, right? So in other words, enterprise meaning where I work on a daily basis, we happen to use Teams as a video conferencing software. Other people use Zoom or whatever. But it's a question of like, how does the metaverse come into enterprise? In other words, how does it help me and my colleagues on a day-to-day basis in how we do our jobs Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? That's the enterprise metaverse. And that's all about enabling better communication, better collaboration, teaming, and all those other things you'd want to do. And leveraging what I would call the superpowers of the metaverse to bring people together and do those things. Now, that part of the metaverse has just come out of the hype cycle, is probably at its peak trough, I would say, in my estimate at the moment. And I'm starting to see very strong indications that it's either come out of the trough and going into the better place, or either substantially with some sectors are already out of it and others are kind of just at the bottom of it. So we're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of investment from the biggest technology companies in the world. All of them, you name any one of them, they're making mega investments. And on our client side, we're also seeing a lot of investment within the businesses that actually want to make better investments for their people. They're starting to invest in bringing the metaverse technology. So there's a confluence of all of that, some maturity in the social consumer metaverse, a lot of maturity in the industrial metaverse, taking best practice from both of them and bringing it more into the enterprise metaverse, helping employees do things in different, better ways. And a lot of investment kicking off, a lot of very strong use cases around the return on investment when you're smart about where you invest. And we could talk about the use cases if you like as well. So I'm very kind of positive and very bullish about where we are in the hype cycle and how we're coming out of the negativity and starting to go into the, let's make real investments and let's create real value.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I feel like I'm behind on all the metaverse now, hearing you explain that. I did get to do a tour of the UC Digital Futures building, and one of our guests on the show, Alejandro, gave me a demo of how they're doing product design with VR headsets and collaborating with people all across the world, and they also have a physical structure. So that came to mind as you were describing that. And I guess for people who are interested in exploring this more, what's the best way to get started? To contact you, or is there a way to dip your toes in the water of the metaverse?
Yeah, I would say just Google is always a good starting point, but not the first 3 pages of Google. So Google search results are dominated by media headlines that I would argue, I'll tell you straight out without naming any of them, they're all wrong. 10 times every day for the last year, I'm reading articles, the metaverse is dead, the metaverse is dead, the metaverse is dead. And I know it's not, because I'm speaking to companies that are making mega investments. So I would just say be wary of what you read. Maybe skip into the second or third pages of Google to start getting the results where people are actually doing real stuff. And take it with a pinch of salt. Like I always joke, the metaverse is dead, long live the metaverse, right? Because in every emerging technology goes through the hype cycle. It's like a universal law. And by the way, Gen AI is going to do the same. We can talk about that a little bit later. And every single emerging technology that has created gigantic positive social and business benefit in the world to date, every technology has gone through the hype cycle. And yet it's here, they're ubiquitous, we are using them. And every single one of them were written off at multiple times. Like I just saw a documentary recently about the gaming industry, and you wouldn't believe how many times the gaming industry as a whole, not just an individual company, but as a whole, was written off. The early stages of the internet and the web were completely written off by the media. I could go back any big technology evolution. I can show you all the media headlines, every one of them for a year out of hype, right about how this is dead, it's going nowhere. And yet every single time, every one of those technologies has become ubiquitous, largely across the world, creating a lot of value societally and from a business point of view. And I find it fascinating that people seem to forget that that's literally a universal law. And why do we keep on choosing to believe the media headlines where they honestly don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Well, I know back in 2010, 2011, with my social media agency, Sociality Squared, I definitely have a presentation on my computer called "Facebook's Dead, Long Live Facebook."
Yeah, cool.
Definitely have seen that too on the social media side. Well, you said that you were bullish about the metaverse. I know something else that you're bullish about is artists in technology. And I've been lucky enough to see some of your presentations on this and just talking over, some whiskey, probably Irish whiskey, on the topic. But I'd love for you to kind of share your thoughts with our audience on the role of artists in technology and business too, and why you're so bullish on this topic.
Yeah, so it goes back. I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory on this. So, as I mentioned at the start, I did an undergrad in engineering and aeronautical engineering, and I did a PhD in aerodynamics. And so I was, went deep into the technology and engineering and science side of things. And then I joined an organization called Bell Labs, which today have 10 Nobel Prizes, 2 in chemistry and 8 in physics. And they've invented things like the laser, the transistor, CCD. I could go on, right? A Unix operating system, C, computer language, all that stuff, right? So I came from a deeply academic, deeply scientific technology background. And then I went into work, and I worked in an organization that played a very prominent role in all of modern society technologically. And that's all good, right? Really good contributions to humanity. Now, when I was there, though, what I realized was, and myself included, everyone that comes from that deep technology background, there's only one world model they have, and there's only one lens through which they view the world. And that world model and that lens is a technology lens. In other words, every problem is a tech problem and every solution is a tech solution. And I used to find this just generally very bizarre. I had a very different way about seeing the world or thinking about the world or questioning my own value as a technologist in the world. And I never had, it was an inkling, it was an intuition, it was a big question I had, but I never had something that I could point to and say, oh, that's the solution. That's the thing that points me in a direction that helps me reconcile or make sense of this tension I had in my own mind about me being a technologist, working with technologists, loving technology, but yet feeling there was something seriously wrong with everything. And I mean wrong in that how universities train in the subjects, how employers employ and expect you to deliver value and all that kind of stuff. And I also realized that, in the world, we have people that decide where money is invested to create technology. We have people that then decide what those products are and how they go out to the market. And we have people, us, me and you, that are consumers that decide what we spend our money on. And across all of that, where there's humans and people touching each touch point of how technology is made, deployed, and consumed, almost no one ever thinks about the human at the center of all of that. By human, I mean the human condition, not Domhnaill, the human consumer who they segment in a certain way from a marketing point of view. I mean, what does it actually mean to be human, right? That's what I mean. So I was very... I had a lot of questions, honestly, philosophically, about what the hell was I doing all my years in college, and I spent a lot of them. And then, magically in New York, I think it was May of 2016, we were invited to an event at the Red Bull Music Academy in New York. And it was I won't go into the history, it's too long, but it was the 50th anniversary of a seminal event that Bell Labs did with artists, the engineers in Bell Labs and artists in New York in 1966. And there it was like an artist and engineer meetup in New York City in commemoration of this thing that happened 50 years ago. And every single artist I spoke with, literally blew my mind. When I say literally blew my mind, I'm not exaggerating. Like, the analogy I give is that I feel like someone dropped an intellectual anvil on my head. They spoke about technology, they spoke about humanity, they spoke about society in a way that I never heard anyone else use those words, think those ways. And I've been very privileged. Like, I've worked with some of the best universities in the world. I've worked with and advised startups. I've worked in Bell Labs with, some of the smartest technologists in the world. And not once did I even come close to having conversations that touched on these topics and these intersections that are of deep importance. And when I met with the artists and I had those conversations the first night, I walked away from that just with my mind blown and completely opened up. And then I realized, this is the thing I've been missing. This is the perspective that helps me reconcile the tensions in my own head as a technologist and someone that loves technology, but honestly has a lot of, it could be so much better, I'll put it that way, right? So that's kind of the backstory. So I then realized that it wasn't just about my generation and how I was educated and how I went to college and how I was expected by my employer to create value. Even the younger people that I was hiring out of universities all over the world had the same education I did, and they were completely oblivious to this perspective. My employers were oblivious to the fact that they were paying me a lot of money and I didn't even know these things. Like, I was oblivious to these other ways of thinking about technology in the world. And that's why I initially created the first artist in residence program at Bell Labs, was to deeply infuse that perspective, that way of thinking, deep into our technology, deep into the minds of our technologists, and also deep into business. And by business, I mean not just to do this as a fun, altruistic, check the box, cool innovation thing. I mean deep into business in that you can provably create value from bringing the worlds of art and creativity and technology together. And that's where I saw a really big gap in the world, is that a lot of people did things on the edges or fun things, or did bring artists in, but it was very superficial or very transactional. There was no foundational thinking. There was nothing for longevity built into it. And I wanted to make sure we created value that had longevity, that was strategic, and that would meaningfully create value for the business side of things as well. So anyway, that's a long backstory to why I invest and why I think about it so much. But it's a bit of a personal journey, but also thinking about not just myself as an individual, but where are the gaps and areas of improvement that I see across tech, just generally and globally.
I love that. And hearing you say that is getting me even more excited about my podcast, because I'm so lucky to have these conversations with artists and amazing minds like yourself. So I love that. Well, and I know, at least from the Bell Labs program, that you paired the artists with the engineers. And the way that you always described it is like engineers go hone in on one problem, and artists, think very broadly. But you actually need differentiation for innovation to happen. That's how evolution works. So I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that, because you're pretty bullish on what innovation means too. So.
Okay. On that in the past, it's got me in a little bit of trouble. So I think, from an innovation point of view, it's really is an overused word, but we would talk about it being...
How has it gotten you in trouble? Do people have too strong of reactions or rejecting it?
Yeah, well, it's everything is I think I've said this, right? We've been at events before on panels, but if everything is innovative, then nothing is, right? And I think it's just an overused word, and people just say, it's an innovative product, or it's an innovative person, or it's an innovative brand. And it's kind of a meaningless thing. And I find most people that supposedly work in innovation don't actually know, again, fundamentally what it is. So I think for something to be innovative, it has to be new, it has to be unique, there has to be some kind of new feature, new thinking, some new thing. But newness on its own is not good enough. It has to actually have impact. So it's uniqueness or newness or invention plus impact. Now, that impact can be commercial impact, or that impact could be societal, global impact. It doesn't matter, but it has to be those two things. Otherwise, it's not innovative. Now, in my world, I'll try and explain this in a good way for a podcast, right? But there's this kind of there's a theory that can be applied to innovation, and it comes from a biological theory of evolution, and it's called the adjacent possible. And the easiest way for me to describe it is, if you think about the complexity that is life on Earth today, and we'll take humans as, supposedly the pinnacle of that, although sometimes we could debate that maybe. And for anyone that's listening that can't see my face, I have a cheeky smile at the moment.
And I'm holding back from laughing. Not doing a good job.
So the theory of the adjacent possible in biological evolution is a way to explain how did we emerge at such complex life today from basically 4 primary ingredients in the earliest days of life on Earth. Like when the first individual cells emerged wherever they did on Earth about 3 billion years ago, what was it that happened from 4 base ingredients that were pretty much useless on their own to evolve to the point of complexity that we have today? And in short, and I'm no biological chemist or anything, but in short, what happens is each of them on their own don't have much value. One combines with the other, it might not have much value. It creates a thing or creates multiple things. A lot of that is junk. A lot of that gets thrown into the evolutionary dustbin. But something comes out of that has value. And that valuable thing persists. And then that valuable thing or valuable things then connect with the previous primary ingredients. But there's multiple new things that emerge out of the integration and bringing together and the collision of these very basic things that are only 4 ingredients. They all start creating all these permutations, all these evolutions, all these additional value creation opportunities. Now, most of it is junk and does not persist through the evolutionary chain, but the things that work really well and they get improved upon. Now, what that really is to say is whether you believe that or not. By the way, it's a scientific thing. It's not like debatable if you believe in science. But anyway, where that comes into innovation is a lot of innovation to this point in life has been really good, strong innovation in a particular area. Where a lot of people believe the future of innovation is at the intersection of different disciplines, different skills. And I could extend that further and say the future of innovation lies at the intersection of different brains, different types of human intelligence, and different lived experiences. No, and again, I don't want to go too much on this because it's hard to describe some of these things, but a lot of people don't realize, for example, there's 9 different types of human intelligence. So when someone says, oh, they're very intelligent, what they're actually saying is they're probably really intelligent or smart in one dimension of human intelligence, but they might not be on the other 8. So there's spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, emotional intelligence, linguistic intelligence. I can't remember all 9 of them offhand, honestly, but they're the kind of... So what happens now is if you're creating a team, you should be conscious of what's your diversity of intelligences across the team. Have you a bunch of people that are technically or spatially intelligent, but you don't have any of the other intelligence? And that means you'll do good things on that one dimension, but you'll be really terrible on the others. So a lot of the work I do, whether it's bringing artists into technology or into business or thinking about innovation theory or how you create a really impactful team where you have these diversity of lived experiences and diversity of different types of intelligence, it's all about the emerging new things you can create at the intersection of things that were previously siloed and that were never connected. And that's like my whole world model or lens through which I think about. If I was to call it innovation theory, which by the way, I never do. I think you brought up innovation and you brought me down this rabbit hole. I'm sorry for anyone that I've bored immensely. But if I was to talk about it in terms of innovation theory, that's the way I would describe it. But now I often don't talk about it that. I talk about like cognitive diversity and how the cognitive diversity of a team or an individual is the summation of your lived experience plus how your brain works, just your brain chemistry. Are you spatially intelligent or are you musically intelligent? And it's how you kind of connect those things and bridge those things and enable new things to emerge out of bringing these previously siloed things together. That's the simplest way for me to describe my world model around innovation, creativity, and how you have impact and differentiation in the world.
I love that. And I love the rabbit holes. So tangents are welcome. And I know ever since, forget exactly, maybe it was one of Michael and Amel's salons where you first, I forget exactly when you first said that, but ever since it's definitely stuck with me. And one artist that you've got to work with is Harry Yeff, also known as Reaps One for his stage name through the Bell Labs. And I was so lucky to friend him through knowing Domhnaill. And he was actually our very, very first interview on Creativity Squared. And when you described like the anvil and the thoughts, I feel like every time I talk to Harry, one of those moments happens as well. But let's talk a little bit about some of the artists that you're working with at EY, because it sounds like you're doing some interesting things. I was lucky enough to see the exhibit at South by Southwest, so maybe we can start there and then go into some Gen AI projects as well.
Yeah, so we have, I started an artist in residence program at EY, so we have several artists that we work really closely with. And when I say closely, I mean like deeply collaboratively. We meet them every week. We spend hours with them every week. Initially, we spend a lot of time just having conversations and dialogue and just questions like, what does life mean? What does the universe mean? What does technology mean? Any of that kind of stuff. And then we find like we start refining it down to some big questions we continuously collectively come back to. And then we'll ask, do we have a unique point of view or a unique way of bringing this way of thinking to the world? And then we'll prototype something. And then if we're lucky, we get to bring that work to the world stage at something like a South by Southwest. And that's the last time we met was in Austin in March at South by. And Josie's work, Josie Williams, is one of our artists that we were lucky enough to bring the work to that kind of stage. And her project was called Ancestral Archives. So this was actually a Gen AI meets the Metaverse project. But it was all about bringing Black history, culture, and into the world of AI and into the world of the Metaverse in a way that hopefully no one had ever experienced before, and hopefully in a way that would move them to think in very different ways. So the basis of the project is, Josie is very inspired by the works of great American writers, James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, Norziel Hurston, and others, right? And she had spent some time creating what might be normally referred to as bots. So she used machine learning, trained them on some of the writer's work, and then you'd be able to type a question into the bot, and the bot would give you, usually the way people train it would give you almost a word-for-word answer back based on the writing of those authors. And that's kind of how bots are usually used with AI. It's the human has a question, give the question to the bot does all of the work, bot gives you an answer that in that normal non-Gen AI sense, traditional sense, is probably pretty accurate and factual. But all you've done is provided a kind of a poor copy of genius level work from these authors, these artists, right? And kind of Josie often jokes about it, saying it's like the zombification of these people and their work, because it's not really them. It's like a poor copy of them. So Josie was inspired by that and started working with the machine learning algorithms where she wanted to take a very different approach. So instead of training it to give you like exactly an answer like James Baldwin would have given you, she trained it so that it would give you an abstract, more poetic response that sometimes might not make sense at all and often might not even sound like the authors themselves. And through our work with her and through all of the conversations, we decided that we would call these bots virtual poets. Because now what happens is you as the human, you have a question, you ask it a question through, in one part of the experience, a typed interface. The bot gives you a response, but it gives you a poetic response. And you now as the human are confronted with, you have to stand there and you have to engage your brain and you have to try and figure out how that response makes sense to you in the context of your lived experience and your world model. And people really struggled with this in the experience in South by Southwest, even though we would explain it to them and the motivation and how it's a different thing. Some people got it and they were blown away. And they were like, oh, this is fundamentally different to how everyone else is thinking about AI. This is a way to make me think in new and different ways. This has helped me be more creative. And others were like, I don't get it. I asked it a question. I want the answer, But even those folks that didn't quite get it, they were confronted with having to think about what AI means to them. And that's the whole role of the artist often, people would say, is to drive people to think, right? So that was really positive, and it showed this very typical artist way of acting as a counterpoint to everything else that everyone is doing. Like, people worry about algorithms and all of that and machine learning and Gen AI replacing people's jobs and being more creative than us. And the artist comes in and shows you actually it can work with you and it can help you think about yourself and the world in a very different way. And that's why one of the reasons I love artists. I could go on endlessly about different artists and different learnings I have from them. And then what we did is we took with Josie to bring that into the metaverse. We kind of created these masks of those authors, those writers, inspired by West African culture, like the masks that you know from West Africa, kind of try to personify those virtual poets in a more visual, interactive way. And we created this gigantic 3D interactive immersive environment where people could come in, talk to the authors, but get the virtual poet response and navigate the world, and really starting to get a sense of how you can connect the physical and the digital and how AI can come into these 3D worlds and create new types of experiences and really provoke people to think differently. So that was Ancestral Archives that we launched at South by Southwest, and we were really excited about that because the response we got was either exceptionally positive and it blew people's minds and they got it, or it was, this was a great experience, I don't quite get it, but I'm going to go off and think about it for 3 weeks. And either way, that's a very positive response.
It was very cool. And I know for all the listeners that sometimes it's hard to visualize what we discuss on the show. So I'll be sure to include links and some video and images of the exhibition on the dedicated blog post. But yeah, I got to see it. It was in a room and it almost had like an immersive experience to it because the room was really dark and had all of the different screens where you could, ask questions to the virtual poets. And I remember asking one, and the answer, it came across as very like unapologetically Black, which I really appreciated and almost reminded me of the writings of Ta-Nehisi Coates. It was very cool. And then one area was just 3 big, almost like not IMAX screens, but where you stood in the center of the screen. So it felt very immersive and interacting with it. So it was a very, very cool exhibit. Well, one thing that you said before we go into the other artists on Gen AI is that you have all these amazing conversations with these artists and some of the same themes kind of emerge and bubble up, and then you start interrogating and exploring those. Can you tell us, because at the time of this recording, we're kind of at the end of 2023, looking to 2024, what are some of the current questions or conversations that are bubbling up that you're thinking a lot about with your artists now?
We do a lot of work and thinking and research and prototyping and testing in the area of, and I purposely combine these 2 words, identity and inclusivity. And with the artists in particular, I think they all naturally just tend towards one of their lenses through which they view the world and the human condition is through a lens of identity, representation, and what that means for inclusivity. And again, some of these words, like inclusivity is a little bit like innovation. It's a word a lot of people use and they really don't understand what it means. And honestly, what do I even know about it, what it means? But I work with a lot of super smart people that have very different lived experiences from me, and I learn from that. What does it mean in how they identify, and what does it mean on how they can be included in experiences, and what does it mean for them to represent their identity, whether it be in the physical world or in these new emerging digital/virtual existences? So a big theme that consistently comes back, and this is, I think I mentioned earlier, the human condition, right? This is a human condition level topic. This is something that will never go away for humanity. It's something that's critically important at our core when you think about identity, how we identify ourselves, how we choose to represent contextually in any moment in time, how that is evolving now with these new digital and virtual realities that we're creating, and also how it's evolving with the younger generation, Gen Z, how they think about identity, representation, inclusivity is fundamentally really different from some of the generations that have come before. And I find working with artists, we kind of go deep on that and we have sight of that honestly years in advance of everyone else. Like the artists are already at the forefront of thinking about those social needs, those social tensions, the role that technology might play positively or negatively. They're already living in the future. So you know this expression, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. It's exceptionally powerful concept. And I truly believe that I get to experience the future today by working with the artists because they're so deep in this and they deeply think about what it means to be human in the context of these conversations. So yeah, that's kind of one of the big things that inspires me, honestly. And like for anyone that might see a picture of me or, is trying to figure out, I'm a white guy from Ireland, right, who happens to live in the US. So, what the hell do I know about a lot of these things? I only know about my own culture. I know about my own identity, my own inclusivity. So we work very closely with folks from these communities with different lived experiences, different ways of thinking about the world and doing good work in the world. Because otherwise, this is back to my comment about tech earlier, I would do a Google search on a thing, right? And I'll get Google answers. And then the technologist thinks they're so smart that with a response on Google, they can go off and create a solution to meet the needs of that person or that community. And I think it's one of the most disgusting aspects of tech that drives me kind of crazy, if I'm being honest. And that how could you possibly know what it is like for someone in any community or any lived experience if you haven't been in that situation yourself? So the only way I can get close to that is by working really closely with people from those communities that are affected by certain things in certain ways, and by spending a lot of time. And I mean, when I say a lot of time, I mean the artists we work with, as I said, we work with them for at least a year at a time. We meet them weekly. And when we're getting into serious, intensive experimentation, prototyping, or bringing the work to the world mode, we're working with them several days for hours upon hours a day every week, right? So we're talking about deep, intensive getting to know each other. And I believe that's the only way that you can create this kind of real social value in the world, is you have to build common ground. You have to understand their world models, their lenses of the world, what words they use, what those words mean. Then you start sharing this knowledge, and then you can start kind of turning those different perspectives and lived experiences, instead of it being potentially a thing that creates tension and a gap between you and the other person, you can start tapping into them to create new things of value to the world. So that's, you see, I get very kind of amped up about this, really deeply passionate about it. I wish more people could see the benefits of bringing these different disciplines and ways of thinking together the way I've been privileged enough to have, to be able to see it up close.
I love that. And again, like what I said at the beginning, you have one of the coolest jobs in the world, because you do get to sit at this fun intersection of art and tech. And also, I think identity is super fascinating as well. And of course, I value inclusiveness too, and accessibility. But especially, as you know, I've digitally cloned myself with a hyper realistic avatar. And going back to our metaverse, like I think actually everyone will have, clones or digital clones before long, just as like a natural extension of how we express ourselves in these, more immersive worlds and whatnot. But you mentioned before we started recording that you have one of your artists that's working on a Gen AI and identity project. So can you tell us a little bit more about that specific project?
Yeah, Eva Davidova is one of our current long-standing artistic collaborators at EY. We've been working with Eva for about a year and a half now, really intensively. And, as I said, like after a lot of conversations just about the human condition and life and all of that, we kept on coming back to this kind of comment that Eva made where she talked about the homogenization of humanity through technology. And you could think of, you could link homogenization to globalization as an example, and how lots of parts of the world now are starting to merge to be a lot more like each other and all that kind of thing. But she was specifically talking about in the context of our project around when you go onto a metaverse environment today, even when you get to select your avatar and customize it, it's nothing like you. It nowhere near represents the nuance or who you are at your essence. And because of that, what it's basically doing is homogenizing you, even though the technology will pretend to allow you to personalize it and customize it. But in actual fact, you're kind of just looking like everyone else through these representations. So that's what she means by the homogenization of our humanity from an identity point of view. And then we were talking about, well, what does it really mean to be human, and how do people communicate? And we talked about things like, a well-known fact, 70% plus of human communication is nonverbal. It's all body language, and it's facial expressions, and it's things like it's tones, right? It's all that kind of thing. So we were thinking a lot about that, and the idiosyncrasies and the nuances of each of us as an individual versus how you get homogenized by selecting your avatar on these systems. And Ava then had this idea, as she calls it, and we're kind of calling the project now Maximizing the Minimum. What the idea was, how could we use some types of AI technology like machine vision to interrogate a person, sense them, look at their gait, look at their body movement, look at their facial expressions, whatever it is, extract out those micro things, those mini things, those minimum things that make you you, and then use another form of AI, in this case it would be a form of Gen AI, to take those micro expressions of you and just kind of blow them up and augment them and make them the fullest representation of you. I'm making stuff up, but so for example, if I walk and I have a slight tilt to my shoulder and one shoulder is lower than the other, some of the algorithms might detect that, might show that up as, this is quintessentially Domhnaill. Like if Domhnaill was blocked out visually, you would know it is him because of the way he carries himself. Let's take that, let's use the Gen AI to take that as the core aspect of Domhnaill, and let's just blow it up, where my avatar might literally become a pair of shoulders that are tilted and nothing else. By the way, I'm completely making up stuff. That's not actually something we've done with Ava. And Ava's the artist, and she would do something a lot smarter than that and a lot better than that. That's just trying to give people on the podcast a sense of we all have our idiosyncrasies. They get lost through our representations, digital representations through technology. Same happens on this call, by the way. We have a 2D flat video where we are communicating pretty well to some extent. It's nowhere near the same thing as if we're sitting across the table from each other in a cafe having a coffee. It's just not the same thing. And anyone that argues that with me, I'm going to have a serious argument with them. So we're talking about that kind of thing. Like there's different modes of communication, and how do we bring the essence of an individual to the fore? How do we allow them to tap into their idiosyncrasies, the soul of themselves? And how do we use different technologies to bring that to life? And that's an example of we are building this today in our experiences and our solutions with Ava. And if we were coming from a traditional tech background, I guarantee you don't even have these conversations. You've no notion that the way you're building avatar solutions today are actually homogenizing people, which is not good, by the way, for anyone that needs to know that. It's not a good thing. And they don't even know that they're causing harm. But we know we're causing harm because we work with people that point it out and say, don't you realize that the way you created that experience is actually going to cut out this part of the community or is going to cause these downstream effects? So as best we can, we expose ourselves to those really deeply thinking about the downstream effects and how we can mitigate them as much as we can up front today. And I rely on artists to help us think through those things substantially, because their entire existence and the way they interrogate the world is at that human lens, at the human condition. And they're the best ones to help you think through mistakes you might make today that might cause individuals or communities harm in the future.
There's so many things I could say and go down other rabbit holes based on what you said. But I love everything about this project. And I think the big question that it's asking is just like, what makes us uniquely human as well, and amplifying those as part of the project. And in the world that we're living in, it's really, with all the AI and new technology, it's really forcing us to ask ourselves what makes us uniquely human. So that's neat that you're exploring that. And I guess for our listeners and viewers, because we do have technologists and we have creatives and people at the intersection of the two, if there's any resources, I guess, for businesses who are interested in artists programs too, where would you direct them? And then for artists who might be interested in EY's artist residency, is there a place that you could direct them to as well? Or maybe other programs that you're also aware of?
Yeah, there's a few programs out there, not so many in industry. We're very proud of ours. Microsoft have investments with artists in residence. Google do quite a lot of work with artists as well. Meta have an artist in residence program. So it's very easily found. Just look up, industry artist in residence programs on Google and you'll find some information. Now, the methodology of creating one, the frameworks for success, how you secure investment, that's a whole other podcast, right? So that's not something that is codified. That's not something you can Google search. This is something that, exists like with the likes of myself or others that run these programs. So you'd have to reach out to those folks directly. And anyone that's seriously interested in establishing a program like this, or asking questions from an artist point of view, what is it like to work in industry when you're an artist in residence, happily accept direct contact with myself. I easily found on LinkedIn. My email is easily found as well. And I'll share that with people, because it isn't for everyone, by the way. I mean, some people take to it really well, and there's others that it would be a terrible idea for them to even contemplate it. And, these are the kind of things you should talk through with people that have lived this day in, day out for years.
Well, I know we could go on and on, but I try to keep these interviews to an hour for our listeners. And one question that I like to ask all my guests is if you want our listeners and viewers to remember one thing from our conversation, or just in general related to anything that's interesting to you, what is that one thing that you want them to remember?
I think, I would say, just because you're very smart in one area does not mean you're smart in all areas. And remember that there are lots of people around you that have different lived experiences, have different ways of creating value in the world, different types of human intelligence. And you should not discount them because it's not the same as you. Because they didn't go to the same university as you, or they didn't grow up the same way as you. Or because you're spatially very intelligent and they're musically intelligent does not mean that you're more intelligent than them. So I think the one takeaway is, and that leads to why I work with artists in tech and artists in business, but at its foundation, it's that Everyone adds value, everyone creates value. And where the biggest values are being created in the world today is at the intersection of those differences and how you build bridges between those differences and how you turn value, instead of it being tension from the differences, it's value creation of the differences. So I would ask people to think about that deeply. At your core, think about that and think about what that means to be a leader, what that means to hire people, what that means to create teams, what that means to create products. Whatever it is, your algorithms, your data, your products, your leadership, really take that to your core and think about that deeply. That's my desperate ask of anyone listening to this.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I know, one of the very cool things about this podcast is I actually get to listen to these conversations multiple times, like the one that we just had, and then it will go through the editing. And sometimes I even listen to them after post-production, after it's been published. And I know from first meeting you, Domhnaill, I've really appreciated everything that you've said and internalized it. And I'm excited that I get to marinate on this and listen to it a few more times as part of the editing process. Is there anything else that you want to make sure to say today, either about EY or want to promote? I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity if there's anything else.
Yeah, the metaverse is not dead. And I would say dismiss it at your peril. Just keep an eye on it. You don't have to invest in it today, but make sure that if you make a decision to not invest today, it's not going to hurt you in the future, because this is the future. So do you want to lead, or do you want to be a fast follower, or do you want to be a fast loser? Because this is just 100% happening, right? So think about it deeply, speak to people that actually live in this world, engage in the different sectors, different businesses, different geographies every day where we know what's happening on the ground, and be very careful. The media headlines that you read about the metaverse being dead, I would take them with a gigantic pinch of salt. And anyone that wants to learn more, just reach out to me directly, and I'll happily share any knowledge I have in my head to help folks get on the right journey.
Well, we'll have to have you back on the show too as our metaverse resident expert. So people don't have to go to Google. They can just come to Creativity Squared to stay on top of all the trends. Well, thank you so much, Domhnaill. It's always a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the next time we cross paths in whatever city that might be too.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the great work bringing creativity to the world.
Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.